last 4 years. Brendan Marks, college basketball writer for theathletic.com, joins us on 365 Sports. Brendan, thanks for your time. We appreciate it. How much fun will this be, the Final Four, with all the different storylines, including what is NC State and DJ Burns?
Yeah, for me, this is like my Christmas. I love the NCAA tournament and the fact that we have both elements of what I think makes a great Final Four. Obviously, you've got the chalk at the top. You've got UConn. You've got Purdue. You've got two teams who have been basically in the top five of every poll, every metric all season long. But then again, like you mentioned, you've got a true underdog. You've got one of these Cinderellas in NC State, and to some extent Alabama too. Top four seed. I don't know if that counts, but you put all that together. I can't wait. I think the games, the matchups themselves are fascinating. Like, I wish I could fast forward to Saturday.
Brendan, as a person who this is their Christmas, we talked to Brett Yormark last week, and I asked him about expansion of the tournament, and he said it would be modest. How do you feel about the potential of expansion? Yeah,
I think that if I had a perfect world, I wouldn't touch the NCAA tournament. I think that it is the best postseason in sports. I think the fact that you don't always have perfection, like over the course of a 7-game series in professional leagues, in the NBA or in the MLB or whatever, you end up ultimately most of the time getting the better team. But in the span of one 40-minute contest, that's not always the case in college basketball. It's what makes upsets great. It's why we love March Madness. And so to me, it doesn't need to be toyed with. Ultimately, though, the people who make the decisions, the people who are in charge of the money, they're going to expand it. It's basically inevitable at this point. I would argue that the most minor expansion is probably the best case scenario for everybody involved. I think we're probably going to see that first 4 turn into something like a first 8, basically. I'm not expecting there to be huge changes, but for people like Greg Sankey, SEC commissioner, who have said, our teams don't have fair access, like NC State to me is a perfect example this year. NC State was not making the tournament if they didn't win 5 games in 5 days in Washington, D.C. in the ACC tournament. And they did that. They're the second high major team to ever win 5-5. 2011 UConn was the first. And they have earned the right to play in the tournament, and they've earned the right to keep playing from then on. So to me, I would rather not change it, but as little expansion as possible, I think is best for the tournament itself.
So, Brendan, right now, not only just on the men's side, but the women's side as well, seems like the combination of the two are about as hot as it's probably ever been. Certainly on the ladies' side, a lot of talk and buzz, especially after last night's game. But both sides have a spot of interest right now in Raleigh, North Carolina, as you wrote about for The Athletic. 2 teams in the Final Four. What's it like in Raleigh, North Carolina right now?
Yeah, honestly, for years, NC State fans have said they were cursed. Basically ever since the Wolfpack won the national championship in 1983, they've kind of just been languishing in like this miserable sports nightmare. And so the fact that has kind of been lifted, it's crazy. I mean, you see, when I flew into RDU coming back, I was in Los Angeles with North Carolina for the West region, which obviously Alabama ended up coming out of. But when I flew back into RDU, it was minutes after NC State had won, and they already had the LED signs changed. I walked around NC State's campus yesterday. It's like, Kevin Keatts couldn't be the bigger rock star over there right now. So it's just really cool to see like a school like that has been suffering for a while in terms of sports fandom finally get an opportunity. I have no idea what's going to happen this weekend on the men's or the women's side, but just the fact that NC State is included in that, like, you have a generation of fans who have kind of been living off of a memory or off of a story, and now they get to experience it themselves. That part is really cool just to be, in close proximity to.
That is funny that you say the way you say it as a story, because 1983, for every single student that's not, coming back to their, second thing in life, that's what it is to them. Like it's stories their parents and grandparents have told them. So it's not a memory as much as it is a thing they see painted on the wall. So it's a completely different thing.
Yeah, and there's this classic NC State bar that opened in like 1950, 1951 called Players Retreat. And when Joe Valvano was the coach, he used to go there. He had a quote-unquote booth that was his, and he would basically hold court there. And you walk into Players Retreat today, which I did yesterday, and it's still all those same old photos. It's cardiac pack bumper stickers. It's license plate. Like, that is the way that NC State fans, at least like the current generation, knows about, that 1983 run, and obviously the documentary and all of the stories they've heard. And there's a number of figures from that 1983 team who are still around campus. I think, I was listening and trying to listen as best I could to a couple of tours that were going on around campus when I was walking around yesterday. And, one of the parents of a student who I guess was potentially going to enroll was asking the tour guide, what is it like being a student? And she was saying how great it was. And then asked, did you go to NC State? And he said, yeah, I lived through that. And she said, I know you've been waiting 40 years for this. So it is really cool just to have it happen like that, and to happen in a similar fashion to that run in 83 obviously makes it that much more special.
Brendan, as you know, I contacted you trying to get you on last week, but man, the media sessions and the coverage, it was just not the right time. So when I reached back out to you, and then I saw your story about your father and where he was buried in a cemetery, in the same cemetery as Jim Valvano and also Lorenzo Charles. And there's the tweet we put up. There's the Valvano headstone. Wow. I mean, how that connects to you too.
Yeah. I remember when we buried my dad, and as we were, going through making all the processionals, it's kind of like a quippy one-liner. If a funeral can have a funeral home can have those, they kind of throw it in like, hey, and by the way, Jimmy V's buried here. And so now, after I obviously is a sports fan and a sports lover myself, like every time I go to visit my dad on the way out, I just take one extra turn and I go past Jimmy V's headstone. And usually I have never been there where there's nothing at his gravesite. There is usually some flowers or a ribbon or a letter. For a while there was a basketball where somebody had etched "Never Give Up" like into the ball, and it had faded from orange to white because it'd been out in the elements for so long. But I figured, no better time to go than yesterday. And, I've never seen it that packed. And I probably should have tweeted out a photo of Lorenzo Charles's gravesite as well, because he had some flowers and had some autographed flags and things down there. But it's just overwhelming how many NC State fans are still going back to that gravesite. I saw one Twitter user responded to me and said that she's been going there and dropping off flowers every game, pregame, as like a superstition. So, I cannot emphasize enough to people who are not from Raleigh, North Carolina, like how much NC State collectively as an athletics department and school has been chasing the magic that Jim Valvano summoned back in 1983. They've been chasing it for 40 years. And so the fact, again, that it's happening in a similar fashion that it has been, 9 wins in 20 days now after a team that was 17-14 in the regular season. Like, people are going back there, and it feels like if there was a curse that was lifted, it feels like, or if there was a curse in general, it feels like it's been lifted now. And it's pretty cool just to see the outpouring of support still for the Valvano family.
One of the things that we had Gary Hahn, the voice of NC State, who's retired or trying to retire, but is certainly enjoying the fact that he has at least one, maybe two more games left. And we brought up 83, and then he said,
it's an elite club to be a part of. And so obviously, again, 83 gets all the headlines just because it was so memorable and everything. And but there have been opportunities. Like, NC State has had good teams since. If you had asked me a month ago, where does this stack up in the last decade of NC State teams, I don't even know that I would have said it was in the top 5. Like, but again, kind of like in 83, this team has caught some magic. They're playing with house money at this point. And I think strictly from a basketball standpoint, they're a really difficult matchup to plan for, especially if you have a 1-day turnover, but even in a 3 or 4-day turnover, just because they have so many different pieces and so many different combinations. And, that's part of the fun of this whole story too, is all the different characters.
Brendan Marks with us, theathletic.com on 365 Sports. The Final Four coming up, of course, this weekend.
What would you have said was the status of the coaching staff at 17 and 14 compared to now when they're talking extension?
Yeah, well, so, I'll be honest with you guys. Like, I went to the ACC tournament on Tuesday in Washington, D.C., the first day when, there's quite literally dozens of fans in the stands, because there was a good chance that if NC State had lost its first game in the ACC tournament to Louisville, which obviously fired Kenny Payne basically immediately after the season ended, if NC State had lost that game, which it trailed at halftime, I think there's a very good chance that Kevin Keatts also would have no longer been the coach at NC State. And so to go from that to being, the center of all of these job conversations, and players are outwardly being asked, what do you think about the status of your coach? What's your case for keeping Kevin Keatts? Yada, 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 on. And Now, by virtue of NC State having made it this far, by virtue of NC State having won the ACC tournament, Kevin Keats' contract had several provisions in it. He's already been granted a 3-year extension. He's already been granted a $400,000 raise, and he's already made several $100,000 of bonuses too. So, I mean, if I'm not kidding here. If NC State wins 2 games in Phoenix this weekend, I would not at all be surprised if the man gets a lifetime contract. I'm serious. To go from being on the brink to that, it would be one of the most incredible coaching stories of any sport that I've probably seen in my lifetime. It is just miraculous to turn around and the perception of Kevin Keats from late February to now.
Brendan, when it comes to having both teams still alive in the tournament, I know UConn has that as well. How does the share of the kind of love go around? Are the men kind of soaking up most of the headlines, or are the women getting their fair share as well? Like, what is sort of the balancing act you feel like across campus and throughout Raleigh right now?
Yeah, I think obviously the improbability of the men's run has played a big role in the attention that they're getting. And obviously after they won the ACC tournament, which the women did not do, that was a big selling point. ACC tournament shirts are still, going like hotcakes here. However, like over the last 5 to 7 years, the NC State women have been by far and away the better of the 2 programs. Like, it's not even close. The women won 3 consecutive ACC tournament titles from 2020 to 2022. In 2022, they swept the ACC. They had the regular season as well, made the Elite Eight, lost in pretty controversial fashion to UConn in a game that was played in Connecticut when NC State was the number 1 seed playing a de facto road game. So the women's program has had crazy support over the years. I would argue they've probably had better attendance over that span than the men. So certainly the women are getting their shine, and I think it's been cool to see too. Like, the men and the women continue to shout each other out. The women's game, they qualified for the Final Four a couple of hours before the men did, right as they were getting back into their locker room. And both the men and the women were FaceTiming each other after they won their game. So it's cool to see it be split equally. And again, they both have really tough tasks waiting for them in the Final Four. But I'm done. I'm done picking anybody but NC State. I'm done being wrong about thinking NC State's going to lose.
Well, it's been a great story, and the footwork and the touch, what DJ Burns has brought to the table, he against a 7'4" guy, will be interesting. Brendan, you can hear and feel the passion of college basketball in your voice. Thank you very much for being a part of the show. Glad we got a chance to get you on, and go enjoy your Christmas this week.
Absolutely. I appreciate you guys. I hope you enjoy all the games, and we'll see how it all shakes out.
We will absolutely do that. Brendan Marks, the Athletic.com with us in the